to start exactly with this question, I mean, it seems to me, looking at your career, especially your researches, that what you said years ago, 8, 10, 15 years ago, seems related to the now, to our current days. So, and you spoke about genomics, stem cells, obviously robotics. So what you are studying now, what are you researching about right now that can be the future in the healthcare, or maybe in the in our reality in general?
So I think, I think part of everything now has to do with the explosion of information in medicine. So we have data on patients and how patients do. We have imaging. We have all of these things that are all in different places. We also have now the ability to know about the patient. When the patient wears an iWatch, we know their heart rate. We know how many steps they take. And as a physician, that as a surgeon, especially a surgeon who takes care of patients with back problems, that's very important. Because when somebody comes into me, I would love to know how they're doing every day. And so the whole idea now, I think the future is going to be to pull those pieces together and have us make decisions for patients based on big amounts of information. So this term artificial intelligence is everybody talks about, but I do believe it's going to help us in the future because it is going to be able to take these large amounts of data and help us decide. So now, for instance, somebody comes into my office, 75 years old, and they have scoliosis. I have to decide, am I going to put this patient through a big operation for 7 hours to make their back straight so they can sit up straight? Or do I tell them it's not going to help them? And right now, that judgment is based on experience and is based on the heart. Do you believe this person's gonna do well? Okay, that's okay, but that's not good enough. So I think where the future lies in one aspect is taking all large amounts of information, x-rays, personal information that might be on a watch, and then your healthcare information, putting that into the big computer and saying, for this patient, this is the right thing to do. Help us make a decision for each patient, personalized decision based on a large conglomeration of data. So I think that's where the future's going. I think that there's no doubt that molecular biology and stem cells are playing a role. The problem with stem cells I think they've had a very big promise. It hasn't delivered yet. We don't have viable stem cell therapies for most diseases, except for cancer, where we do transplant of stem cells. But for a disease like back pain, somebody has discs that are degenerated, we're not quite there yet. Spinal cord injury, we're not quite there yet. So I think that while we're waiting for those things to mature, we have other aspects that we can focus on, and one of them being, that the management of information. How do we take large pieces of information and distill them so that I can make a decision to help a patient? I think that's the immediate frontier right now.
Yeah, let's step into your, ingenious, creation, I would say. I don't know, because I watched a video you did in Seattle last time in the Science Foundation, and you have shown a very interesting slide. You have shown three circles. One was imaging, surgical techniques, and robotics. And you have shown how you combine those three in the image guided surgical robotics. Can you explain for people who are 30 or 75 that just have a back pain very seriously and diagnosed like a big problem, severe, that maybe requires a surgical treatment?
Sure. So the interesting thing is that as we get better at what we do in surgery, it becomes safer for the patients, and we're able to bring these technologies. Really, if you look back 15 or 20 years ago, a lot of what I do took 8 or 9 hours in the operating room. Now I can do a surgery in 1 hour or 2 hours when it used to take 10 hours. And the reason for that is based on what you just said, which 3 things that have gotten better. Imaging, so my ability to look inside of you to see your spine and with an MRI and a CAT scan to be able to have a beautiful picture of the anatomy, beautiful like a Da Vinci drawing, and then take that with uh, surgical techniques for bleeding and things like that, and then utilizing that ability in surgery to know where I am. So to take a pointer and touch your spine and to see where I am. That premise we are doing in the brain every day. So for 30 years, we've been able to look at the brain, touch on the probe, look at the screen to see where we are. The spine, it took a while for that technology to become perfected. The next stage was, I said, why can't we take the picture and draw a line where I want that screw to go, and then have the robot take me right to that. So now we have a new era, a new awakening in spine surgery, the ability now to take a patient, take his CAT scan, and then plan on the scan what we want to do, and then have the robot take us right there. And if you think about that, the interesting thing is that as a surgeon, if I'm putting a screw in your back with my hands and my eyes, my accuracy is about 68%.
68.
So if I told you, if your child brought home a grade and said, "Daddy, I got 68% today, are you going to be happy?" Oh no, of course not. When we use image guidance, it goes up to in the 90 percentile. So when I could look at the CAT scan and do it with my hand, about 90% or more. When you add a robot, we're 98 to 99% accuracy. So it really helps us become better surgeons. The surgeon is still doing the operation. The robot, I would say, I don't want to call it a robot because I think the more proper term is a cobot. The cobot is something that works with the surgeon. The robot, I close my eyes, I leave the room, the robot does everything. The cobot is with me. I plan, the cobot takes me there, I do the screw, I do everything. So it really has given us a tremendous opportunity to improve upon what we've been doing for the past 50 years.
Yeah, Theodore, I would like to ask you a question that could sound, banal, but I think that it isn't. It is the reaction, the sentiment of the old superstars, surgeons, who were very well paid, who are very well paid, and they have to be, they are invited to discuss what the robot can do and so on. And I suppose it was not easy.
So that's a very good question. And I will tell you that the master surgeon, maybe 55, 60 years old, who's been doing this for 30 years, they are very good at what they do. The problem is that the surgeons I'm training now, today, the surgeons that will be there in 5 years, we don't have as much time with them. So the surgeon who's 60 years old, when he was in training, he could work 100 hours a week, 120 hours a week to learn, repeat how we do things. Now, because of regulations and everything else, I don't have as much time with the residents and the trainees. So as I teach them, what do they want? What do they need? They need something that's going to make them better. And also that means I don't have to spend 10 years teaching you how to do something. I can teach you in 2 years. And I think that the master surgeons, I will say, fine. You know, their argument is, what happens when the robot breaks? Then the surgeon's not going to know what to do. And my answer to that is this. In the brain, as an example, if there's a tumor deep inside of your brain, and I have to use this technology to find out where it is, if that doesn't work, I ask my friend, who's a very famous brain surgeon, and he asked me, what happens if the robot breaks? And I asked him, what happens if this breaks? And you can't see deep inside the brain of a young boy with a tumor in the brainstem. Would you do the operation? And he said, no. Aha! So because of that, the reality is that this technology is here now. It's increasing on a daily basis, and it will become the standard. I think everything is about timing and about opportunity. 10 years ago was too early because the technology wasn't there. So what happens if this came out 10 years ago and it wasn't working? People would try it and they'd say no. But now when you look at 25,000, 30,000, 50,000 cases done with robot, it's hard to think that we're going to go backwards. So technology doesn't go back. Hopefully it's going to continue to go forward.
You say the time and opportunity, and it's interesting to see how in the last year, month by month, the numbers of Excelsius Globus sold all around the world, especially in Europe, is constantly growing up. So my question is, what, for example, for an hospital like Casa di Cura Sileno and Arizzola can represent the choice to buy, to make a huge investment acquiring the Globus ExcelsiusGPS?
So I like to think of things not in terms of competing with another hospital. I like to think that the hospital is making the best decision for their surgeons and for their patients. If we have this technology and it can prevent you from putting a screw in the wrong place, it pays for itself. If I can make the procedure take 2 hours instead of 6 hours, it pays for itself. The reality is that if we make things better, if we make things faster, and we make things safer, that technology, the cost becomes irrelevant. If I can prevent somebody from being injured with a screw, going in the wrong place and hitting a nerve or hitting the spinal cord, then it pays for itself. So I think that the hospitals that are adopting, part of it always may be I'm competing against another hospital down the street, but I like to think of it as they're focusing on what's most important for their patients, which is good outcomes and making the surgery, making it better for their surgeons. Why do I want to stay in the hospital till 11 o'clock at night like I did for 20 years, operating late at night, doing this, when I can now do it and be home for dinner?
Can I ask you when did you perform the last surgery? Today. Was it simple? Did you use the robot, the cobot?
I used the robot, yes, and we were able to put screws in through incision this big. So 2 small incisions, and this is an operation that would usually take 3 or 4 hours, 1 hour and 30 minutes. And the patient's up and out walking already. It is fundamentally, for me, and you can say, okay, well, you invented it, you have to use it. Okay, that's fine. But other people are using it too. And as I'm teaching the residents, they say, why do I want to spend 6 hours holding the retractor and moving and this and everything, sweating and bleeding, when you can just and it makes life easier.
I joined the operating room 2 weeks ago, and I spent there 4 hours looking at what was going on, and I was amazed. And at certain moment, it's not a joke, I asked who is the surgeon, because there was the specialist, the technician, who was able to mount piece by piece the robot, and then the doctor, the surgeon appeared. Which is the relationship? I mean, what is going to change in the perception that the doctor, the surgeon, had and has about himself or herself?
Well, I think, listen to me, I think the reality is that the surgeon, and the way this was devised, the way the robot was built, as I was building it, everybody would ask, well, is the robot going to do the operation? You don't need the surgeon anymore. Aha, the surgeon still is doing the operation. The surgeon's making the decisions. And guess what? If something goes wrong, we still blame the surgeon, as we always do. So the fact of the matter is, the reason people are embracing this is because if it's making life easier for the surgeon and for the patient, why wouldn't you do this?
And about the patients, I was impressed. I mean, it was my first time there in the operating room, looking at this finger. I mean, checking the oxygen, and I was just seeing this hand out of the blanket covering the patient. And I was thinking, there is a human being there, a human being there, a human being there. I can imagine that after so many times, I mean, the role for the heart and feelings is limited, or is, I mean, put there. But what happened still, I mean, is still there, especially when you have a kid And
So, in neurosurgery, we see many bad things. We see many bad things. We patients who have brain tumor who die in weeks after diagnosis. People who have a spinal cord injury who come in, they're walking and they get hit by a car and then they're paralyzed forever. So we do see, unfortunately, many, many terrible things in this field. I think it's critical never to lose sight of the fact, as you did, that there's a person. So before the operation, we have a timeout. We say, okay, stop. We're operating on, Mrs. X, and this is what we're doing. And I always say something about the patient. This is a woman who's a grandmother, and she has 4 grandchildren, or she's a teacher in a school. I always say one little thing, and I want everybody, my residents, to know, just to keep in your mind too, that we're not focused on the screw going in. We're focused on, hopefully, the end result, which is that this person is going to feel better and have more function and more ability in life. But I think you have to always put that in context with the fact that, that it is a person, it is a human. So that's a very good observation you make, because things are dehumanized a little bit or depersonalized a little bit when everything is draped and you're not talking to the patient, and you see a hand with a finger, and you realize, well, there's somebody in that. So I'm always understanding in my mind. I always know that there's somebody in there, and everybody needs to know that.
Yeah, Theodore, I have a question that usually I ask to the person I'm honored to talk to, and it's about death. And you spoke about, how much complicated and difficult can be being in front of a body that is suffering, that is very huge, problems. I suppose that you see death very close.
So this is a specialty, unfortunately, which traditionally sees a lot of death because of brain tumors and trauma. When somebody gets hit by a car and they're in a coma. So, death and neurosurgery are 2 things that unfortunately see a lot of each other. One thing I will say is that, I think one thing I've realized now over the years is that obviously death is inevitable. Everybody's going to die. But I realize also that every day is a blessing. And I think we all have to realize that as bad as you think things are, there's always something worse. As bad as you think the day is going, somebody is suffering worse than you are. The fact is that, whatever it is in your life that may not be perfect, there's always a worse outcome. And death is, of course, the ultimate. And that's why, at least personally, as a neurosurgeon, my philosophy has always been, to embrace life, to have that joy for life, because that's what we have. And we're living today because there may not be a tomorrow. You might get hit in the head. You might get shot. You might something, who knows what happened, the pandemic, you might get COVID. You can die. Everybody can die. So I don't want to leave this earth unhappy. I want to make sure that every day we're thankful to God and appreciative for everything that we have. And you know what? There are a lot of bad things in the world. And there's a lot of people suffering. And if you're not one of those people, that's a good day. And if you are one of those people, there's somebody that's worse off too. So I think we have to keep everything in perspective. It's hard to do sometimes, but the reality is every day is a blessing.
Have you ever cried in the operating room?
Not in the operating room. Not in the operating room. I definitely have cried outside the operating room.
So, and Theodore, you graduated from Cornell University.
Yes.
3 photos, 3 pictures you have in mind of those years.
So, probably one of the most beautiful physical places in the world. The trees, there are cliffs with waterfalls and lakes and rivers. It's absolutely physically beautiful. The winter time, it gets very cold and it's very slow. But I will tell you that in the fall and the spring and the summer, it's just spectacular. And it's a wonderful place to go to school because of the physical beauty. You've got to study.
And then the medical school at Georgetown University.
The Catholic school. So I will tell you that at the time I was in Georgetown, there were still many Jesuit priests there. And I think the intersection from a spiritual sense of religion and medicine and surgery all coming together to take care of the patient. The motto was cura personalis, and to cure the person, not just the disease. And I think that's something that's carried with me since I graduated there a couple of years ago.
So God has a role in your life.
Yes, yes. I think it's hard to it would be hard to disavow the presence of a higher being. Hard to say that there's no God when you see what we have done as a civilization, what we have done, and what man has accomplished, and are caring for one another. There is no doubt there is God, and I think he plays a hand in a lot of what happens, obviously, every day to each and every one of us.
I agree with you. And after that Okinawa with the United States Marine Corps, I imagine you there.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I joined the Navy while I was in medical school, and for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to serve my country. Also, there was a scholarship that helped pay for medical school, so those were two options. And with that, I always thought I was going to be on a ship, but they said no, you're going with the Marines. And it was actually a fantastic opportunity because the United States Marine Corps are the first line of defense. If there's an international problem, the Marines are there first. And taking care of them as patients, working with them side by side, running with them, training with them was absolutely a fantastic part of my life. I learned many things about life.
That was the question I had. What did you learn?
So, I learned, I think one of the most important things you learn in the military is that even as a surgeon, the reputation is that the surgeon is in charge, he's God, he's his commander. You realize that I cannot do anything without a team. And each and every day in the operating room, the team that we have, the success of the patient and the surgery has to do with the functioning of the team. And you may be the worst surgeon in the world or the best surgeon in the world, but if you have a bad team, it's not going to go well. So knowing everybody on my team, respecting everybody on my team, and I will tell you, when I walk into the operating room, I greet every single person in that operating room. And when I leave, I do the same thing. And I will tell you, for no other reason than for respect for what they're doing for that patient. But interestingly, that goes a very long way, because if you're sitting as a technician in the corner or the scrub tech, I've seen too many cases where the surgeon will come in, have a bad attitude, throw something, yell, scream, and things don't go well. And you can't, because the technologist might be afraid of the surgeon. That's bad. So what I've learned is that you have to function as a unit. When the Marines go in, they come in as a unit, as a team. And I think that's what makes surgery successful. So I think that exposure for me was very, very instructive.
Theodore, going to YouTube and typing Theodore Nicholas, I mean, one of the words they suggest you to put close to your name is Super Bowl and sport. So, interesting. Then I saw, I went deep and I saw why. Can you explain to me the link you have with sport?
Sure. So one of my big interests is in sports trauma, neurotrauma. So the big one being concussion and head injury with sports, and that's got a lot of attention. So in America, it's got attention with American football. In Italy and Russia and the rest of the world, it's in, with soccer, right? And the fact is that concussions are going to happen. They happen in sports and out of sports. We have to have a better understanding of how to treat them and how people are affected by concussions. So that's been a big area of interest. Along the way, I was very lucky to be able to now work with the National Football League, the NFL, and I'm chairman of the committee on brain injury. So for the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee, which brings together an amazing group of scientists and engineers and researchers and physicians to talk about concussion and how do we make the game of football safer. So we get together several times a year and we look at all of the data on concussions. We look at the design of the helmets to make better helmets. We look at the rules. What rules can we change that make the game safer? So it really is about a wholesale examination of really a multi-billion-dollar industry to see how we can help make that game safer. In doing that, that then trickles down to college football and high school football and children playing football, or not just football, but any sport where there's a collision. Because any sport where two people can run into each other, there's a chance for somebody to hit their head. And the problem now is we realize that if that happens many times, there's a chance over time that we have something permanent develop. And I think probably the most important thing that we have learned is that if you have a concussion, the most important thing is to recognize that we had not feeling well after we hit our head, stopping and waiting a period of time to rest and make sure that the brain recovers. Part of the problem that we have seen, I think, in the past was, boom, go back in the game. Boom, you're back in the game. We never diagnosed it, we never admitted it, and we never allowed the brain to heal. I think giving the brain a chance and recognizing that there's a problem. So we have a very, very robust concussion protocol in the NFL. And at every game, there are about 30 doctors at every NFL game. We've got doctors up in the booth with binoculars. We have 2 doctors, one on each side, whose only job is to look for concussion. And if any one of these doctors or a player or a teammate thinks that somebody may have had a concussion, all they have to do is say something. That player comes out. We start doing an assessment on the field. If it looks like maybe he had a concussion, he's out of the game. Done. Then we send him to the locker room where we do more formal testing. So there's no doubt that we're trying to make the game as safe as we can. Nothing in football or in life will ever be 100% safe. But I will tell you that I don't know of any other organization that has spent more time, more money, and more thought in trying to make this safer for the players.
That's a great news to know, a great fact, I believe. And in my program, which is called Memorandum, we identify a date, a very specific day that in the life of my guest changed something, but that also has changed something for the humanity somehow. And I don't know, I wrote down some dates, but I believe that you have the right one. I mean, October the 4th was the day you did 2017, you performed your first operation with the robot, or August 2017 when FDA approved, I mean, the robot. Is this one of those 2 dates, or you have another one?
So I think there's no doubt October 4th to me will always be a very special day. Interestingly, my birthday is on October 3rd, so we missed it by 1 day. I wanted to do it on the same day, and then I wouldn't have to forget. But that's important. And you know, there are many dates in our lives that are important. You know, I've been very happily married for almost 26 years. So anniversary, October 22nd, a very important date. 2 boys, their birthdays, very important date. So there's a number of important dates, but the day that we did the first case for me, at least, was a very special day. It was literally like the birth of a child, because this technology I had been working on for almost 20 years, 17 years when we went to the operating room. And to draw on a napkin and have a cup of coffee at Starbucks and talk to Neil Crawford, who is my co-inventor, about this problem. He's an engineer, and we would have coffee 3 or 4 times a week and talk and talk and talk. And then we built a prototype, and then we started a company, and then, you know, but every step of the way, you know, this takes you in many, many different directions. So it really became a labor of love. And, you know, I would go home and I would tell my wife, well, we have this is exciting. She'd say, that's nice. That's very nice. That's nice. And then, you know, ultimately we shared in the excitement when it finally came to fruition.
how much important is to have a family that supports you, that really supports you, not just with, I mean, with words.
You know, I listen. This goes back to that other question about death and life. You know, we have a few things in this world that we leave with, behind, but our children are one of them. So that investment and in time and love and energy has been that's been the highlight of my life, is spending time with my family. And I will say that that is my inspiration, are my children and my wife, and that mutual respect and love for each other really makes things so much better, doesn't it? It really makes us better people. It makes us more understanding. And I tell my wife every day, I don't think I could have done everything that I've done without her support. And that's something that is critical. And I think if you think that you can do this all without having support at home, it doesn't work that way.
Theodore, the day, the period I was working on my book, my wife was pregnant, and I became father, I mean, in February, and the book was out in November. So that's why I was really curious and interested in knowing what being father, what being, I mean, a parent means. And how do you explain?
Is it a boy or a girl?
It's a boy.
Okay. That advice is easy.
1 year and a half.
Listen, they grow up very, very fast. And I will tell you that I remember very clearly bringing the boys home from the hospital. And I remember having dinner with my son last week. But in between, things happened so quickly. So being available and being actively participating, I will tell you that this is where the teamwork comes in, because as a surgeon, I couldn't be home every day for dinner. I can't be home every night to read a story, but every moment that I could be, I was. And that is a critical part of their development, my development as well. But being able to show them things, to teach them things, to spend time with them, I will tell you that you blink your eyes and they're gone out of the house. So every day you want to enjoy that time with them. And everybody asks, what is the best age? They're all great ages. I keep saying that. Oh, how's two? I love 2 years old. What about five? Five is fantastic. And it really, and you realize too, that, even high school. So people will say, oh, we had trouble with the high school. This, yeah, children can be difficult. They're different things. But the reality is that parenting is not easy. It is not easy being a parent. It's not easy raising children in today's world, which is very complicated. There's many factors trying to break into the family, and not the least of which we talked about, with the social media, the telephone. That's part of life. It has to be managed, and we have to have those discussions, and we have to make those choices the best we can for our family.
Theodore, let's speak about Italy. Let's talk about Italy, because we are in Italy. I know that you love Italy.
I love Italy. I think that when you talked about originally, you mentioned that maybe there hasn't been a big technology boom in Italy. I mean, let's look at somebody like Leonardo da Vinci. He's a polymath. He was the original inventor. He's the original engineer, anatomist, artist. And you look back at the culture and the contributions to civilization that the Italians have made, it's staggering. And I think that we have to, instead of thinking, well, now we haven't done so much, there's a huge, rich history there. And I will tell you that my colleagues in Italy, the neurosurgeons, one of which was in Rome now, who was here at Johns Hopkins, Alessandro Olivi, fantastic surgeon, was here at Hopkins for years, now is the chairman at one of the big hospitals in Rome. And the fact of the matter is that I think the world has become a much smaller place. The ability for you and I to speak like this on Zoom at a moment's notice is, it's there now. And I think that from a technology standpoint, being exposed and having an understanding of what's happening around you leads to good things. So bringing this technology to Sicily, bringing this technology to Italy is going to be helpful, because what I'm hoping is that my friends in Italy are going to make the next generation. They're going to do the next great thing in robotics. And that will be very nice because that means I will get to come and visit and have some fantastic food and some fantastic wine and meet with all my Italian friends.
It's recorded. You will be our guest in Italy.
I can't wait.
You are Greek root.
I'm Greek.
Yeah. What is left there?
So I have relatives there. I've got cousins there. My grandparents came over at the beginning of the early 1900s for economic reasons, for opportunity. My wife's parents came over. My wife's parents came over in the 1950s. So very much Greek, and have a strong affinity for that culture, obviously. And when we go to Greece, we usually go into Italy too. So we like to visit often.
The last couple of questions, very short. The first one is, imagine to have a guest that you can choose out of everybody in the past, in the current time, in the future, and to invite him to have dinner with you, and who you would like to choose to have with you, and why, what you would like to discuss with him.
Well, I think this goes back to the original Da Vinci. And I'll tell you, I think the reason is he was such a contributor to so many different fields. I want to know where the thought was, because again, engineering, science, art, anatomy, all those things which are important for a surgeon now, understanding of that global perspective of what we do. I think that would be the most interesting.
And the last question is about a book, if you have, that somehow impacted in your life, not necessarily, linked to the healthcare or medicine.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now. There's a book, and I can say it on the word, called the No Asshole Rule. You know the word asshole? It's not a good word.
Yeah, exactly.
But this book is written by a Stanford business professor, and he talks about companies and organizations and groups where one person, who is that name, can disrupt an entire organization, can ruin an entire organization. And really it has to do with that type of personality, and not, so life, again, getting back to life, is very short. Dealing with people like that, who are not nice, who are difficult, who are negative, who are mean-spirited, I don't have time. So if you're building a company, if you're building a team, if you're building an organization, you want to weed out those people like that, who are truly not good people, malcontents, because your group will function much better, you'll be much happier, and you'll be more successful.
Theo, it was a pleasure. Really, I'm amazed.
The pleasure's all mine, my friend. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Let me know what I can do, and I'd love to see everything when it's finished.
With pleasure, and for sure. Thank you very much.
And I see your son on the counter over there. Yep. Now it's whatever. It's already 10 o'clock at night. Make sure that you spend every moment with them.
Yes, I try. And somehow the good side of the virus was that I could spend more time with my son.
Listen, I will tell you, as horrible as this whole thing has been, again, the blessing of my younger son who's in college, having him come home for a few months, that's time you'll never have again. So, again, it gets back to every day is a blessing.
Thank you very much for this beautiful message.
All right, my friend. Have a great day.
Good luck for everything.
Thank you. Ciao.